Hello YouTube, and welcome to this series about associative remote viewing and how remote viewing is done. This is the first video explaining a bit about what I know and how I've used it so far, and it's mostly about the history and how it works. The practical example of how a session works will probably be done in another video because there's a lot of explanation to do. I've also learned this from several dozen hours of video torrented down and pirated in any way I could. This on top on many articles, forums, and so on. So, remote viewing, what is it? It's the skill or the method of sitting down in a place and getting intuitive data about some target that's far away, out of view, out of any sort of so you don't have any contact usually with the target, and all the data that one gets, that the viewer gets, is intuitive. This can be in the next room or in some drawer, or it can be around the world or off planet even. These off-planet weird targets or angels and so on and so forth are not really the best method to start out with, because you can't get feedback and you can't really check how right you were and how on target or off target. How did it come to be? It came to be during the Cold War, or this is how the story goes, that both the Russians had something going here in intuitive intelligence gathering, and also as a response the US military had to get something going. The approach was rather different. The Russians focused on finding gifted individuals who already had some significant edge over chance and over the rest of the population, and then working with them. Whereas the US approach was to break down the method used by a successful psychic, in this case Ingo Swann. It was a very practical approach. Physicists were at work there, not metaphysicists and those ghost hunters or anything like that. They treated the whole accuracy problem in intelligence gathering like a signal to noise ratio, and they had the data of how to work with, how to fix it, how to improve it. So the whole thing about this remote viewing is not so much getting the data as it is filtering out the good data from the bad data. Imagination, hopes and dreams, free association, and what have you. How was it done? Well, at first they started with putting things in boxes, and Ingo Swann would tell them about it, what's in there. Then they would send agents on the field to an undisclosed location, and Ingo would describe the location, whether it's a stadium or a city or a forest or what have you. And also they noticed with those agents that Ingo could do his session and describe the target before the agents got there, or even before the target was chosen. So this has shown that in a really paradoxical way, our remote viewing can be done both in with a large distance in space and in time, both in the past and the future. And this is, by the way, how I, and I suspect many others, are using associative RV to get an edge over chance in future events like sports bets. More about that a bit later. Now, what are the limitations of the method? The limitations are the kind of data that can be sent through this channel, through this intuitive channel. It's not like normal eyesight. You don't see, you just feel a few things. It has benefits over normal eyesight, and it has drawbacks. For instance, it's been noted that one can go to some bunker in Russia and get inside the drawer and look inside the documents there, and one can tell whether it's a love letter or a drawing or a military description of something or technical. So one can get reasonably detailed in the content, although it's in Russian or Chinese or some language that the viewer doesn't speak. It's not really reading the document, it's more like sensing the content, the associations with it, and so on. In this respect, it's better than normal eyesight. because there's a sort of translation built into the process, a sort of connection to the man that wrote the document, and you can take the data from their mind or their intentions and so on. The limitations are that numbers do not, so numbers, letters, this sort of thing, they do not travel very well through this channel. They get lost or distorted, most likely lost. So this is why you can't really just remote view the lottery and say 46, because this side of the brain that does the coding, decoding, and sensing of information does not know about 46, because it doesn't speak that language with numbers and arithmetic and so on. Sometimes numbers can show up, but it's more like the event. For instance, your birthday is an event, but the date, 6th of June or whatever, is not something that the mind can understand, this side of the mind. So the event, the emotional event with the party and the people and the balloons, yeah, there's a whole reference for that, but not for the 6th of June or the 14th of May or so on. Also, if it's the New Year's Eve party in 1975, you may get 1975 if you got some reference around those years, or something else that you know happened in that particular year. You can feel the proximity sometimes. I haven't done it myself, but I've seen it done a lot of times on the practice side. Just it's a rare event. Numbers don't travel that well. And fast forward to what I think is one of the best applications for me, at least, and also one of the best tests to see if it works, if there's an effect there, and how well it works, is associative remote viewing. Now, ARV works like this. You take a known future event, like a sporting match or a coin toss, and we've seen that. Whoa, I should talk about front loading. Okay, front loading. Front loading is when you know the question. For instance, where did the agents go? A child was kidnapped. Where is the child now, and what's the state of health? If you know the question, then immediately your logical thinking brain starts to create assumptions, so on and so forth. You get a very thin and weak signal of intuitive data, whereas this logical assumption side that we've trained through schooling and training and everyday thinking is very strong. So it overlays with a lot of interference any sort of intuitive data that you get. So what we do to get rid of all this is use target coordinates. For instance, you put the question, where is the kidnapped child, and so and what's the state of his health? You write this on a paper, you put it in an envelope, and you write a code on the envelope. And to the viewer, you just give the code. They don't need, or better said, the intuitive mind that they use for this does not need the text of the question. It can go outside of his head, in the envelope, see the question, then jump outside and see the answer. Go to that kid, see if they're alive, if they're well, if they're scared, if they're coming back. This is exactly how we worked for the first couple of 100 sessions, without any front loading. So without knowing as little as possible about the target. Usually just the code. So you'll get a random code, AB4X5Z, and you start the method from there on. Now back to ARV. We need some way to enclose a known event, like a sporting match, with 2 or 3 possible outcomes, into some unknown targets. For this, there's a two-man team needed. One is the tasker, one is the viewer. In this case, I'm the viewer. And here's how it works. The tasker takes the options of the game. Let's say it's a coin toss, and it's options A and B. And he says, if option A comes around, then the image that I'll show to my viewer is an egg. If it's option B, I'll show him a star. And this pair of images has a code, and I'll never see both of them if the process goes right. I'll only get the code for those 2 images. And I'll make a session, remote viewing session, I'll give it to my tasker. If it's describing something round or ovoid shape and with life inside, it's probably an egg, and it's probably the coin toss will end on A. If it's something sharp with some corners, then it's probably a star, and it will end on B. Long story short, you can have to end the video here, but stay tuned for part 2.